Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Physicists define time as a progression of events from the past to the present into the future. But that theory is shattered when people experience precognition or time slips. The following are two stories that challenge the natural progression of time. The Screaming Children. On April the 20th, 1974, Rebecca Hodgkin from Birmingham, UK, was visiting the Tower of London with a friend, Tessa Grant. Initially, the two ladies visited the various weapons on show, which at the time were located in the dungeon of the turret. After a while, the closed walls gave them a sense of oppression, and so they headed out of the dungeon to get some fresh air. As they were climbing the steps out of the dungeon, Tessa turned to Rebecca and said, "I can hear children shouting." And then she repeated to her friend, and in a louder voice, "I can definitely hear children shouting and crying." Rebecca replied that she must have great hearing because I cannot hear anything, and it must be coming from the tower grounds. But Tessa said, "No, it's closer than that," and began to get agitated. She said, "They're yelling." And at this point, Rebecca also started to get annoyed and said, "It must be coming from downstairs, and I don't propose to go back downstairs to look." And Tessa replied, "Well, surely you can hear it. You must be deaf." And tension was now growing between the two women. The fact that Rebecca could not hear anything, Tessa figured it was pointless continuing the discussion. After they reached fresh air, the subject was dropped, and they went in search of refreshments. 3 months later, on the 17th of July 1974, an explosion ripped through the Tower of London, leaving one person dead and injuring 41. The bomb had exploded in the mortar room in the White Tower at 2:30 p.m, which is where both Rebecca and Tessa had been visiting. At the time of the blast in the small basement room, it was packed with tourists who took the full force of the explosion, leaving people with severe injuries. 2 of the victims were children who were being treated at St Bartholomew's Hospital. The police said it was an indiscriminate act designed to create as much trouble and injury as possible. When Rebecca Hodgkin received the terrible news, she believed that her friend Tessa Grant had had some form of audible precognition, where she'd had a foreknowledge of an event that was yet to occur. Yet she claimed that between the two of them, she is the more sensitive while Tessa is the more casual and relaxed. Yet it was Tessa that somehow honed in on an event that was yet to happen. On visiting such an ancient structure, you would think that one of the women would have picked up an event from the past, such as seeing a ghost or experienced a residual haunting. But Tessa was haunted by something that had not yet happened. The red scarf. At the time of the incident, Arthur Fruin was a young undergraduate and playwright who had decided to spend Easter at Helvig Head, which is a headland on the southernmost end of Dungarvan Harbour on the southeast coast of Ireland. Arthur decided to go for a walk along the coast, and when the weather took a turn for the worse, he was forced to take shelter. It was cold, misty, and starting to get dark when Arthur decided to walk to the nearest village. But the only sign of life came from a distant light, which he initially believed came from a cottage. By the time he reached the village, it was totally dark, but managed to follow the light and discovered that it came from a small fishing boat that was moored on the pier, and the mist had now cleared. Arthur approached the boat. He could see that the hatch was open, and he slowly peeked inside. We found an old man working on a fishing net over a table. Because it was late and very cold, Arthur asked if it would be okay to take shelter in the boat, whereas the old man then beckoned Arthur to join him. The old man then placed a bowl of potato soup on the table for Arthur to nourish and warm himself. After the light snack, the old man then led Arthur to a cabin at the end of the boat, where he would find warmth and shelter for the night. On entering the cabin, Arthur then took off his sister's red scarf that he'd been wearing and hung it on a hook behind the door. Arthur then laid down for what he thought would be a well-earned rest. However, Arthur was feeling unsettled and found it difficult to fall asleep, and for some unknown reason was overcome with fear for reasons he could not work out. He then heard the old man walking down the passageway towards his cabin, and something instinctive in him made him close the bolt on the cabin door to stop the man from entering. At first, he saw the handle on the door move gently. Then within seconds, it started to move frantically. Then all of a sudden, the old man started screaming outside the cabin door to let him in. Now terrified, Arthur was aware that his life could be in danger and looked around frantically for a possible means of escape. But at the same time, the man continued screaming to be let in. Arthur then looked up at a skylight and managed to climb up and smash his way through the glass on the window that led to the deck and escaped to safety. Arthur waited until daylight, until the village slowly came to life and sat down to rest. One of the villagers noticed his scratched and overall bedraggled appearance, whereupon Arthur then told his nightmarish story. After hearing his story, the villager and Arthur made their way to the pier and the boat where Arthur had experienced his horrific ordeal. When they reached the boat, they found it totally empty and in a bad state of repair, and was almost a wreck, where the timbers were old and slimy and rats were scurrying around the table. Arthur could not believe that it was the same boat that he had boarded, where he had sat down at the very table to eat potato soup, but he had no doubt in his mind that it was the same boat. The villager then told him a story that would fill Arthur with even more fear. He said that 50 years ago, a young undergraduate had been walking on the pier and had sought shelter on the boat and had been murdered by an elderly fisherman on board. The old man was found guilty of the young man's murder and hanged at Dungarvan. Arthur realised that there was a creepy similarity in the story, as he too was an undergraduate student. The boat had remained abandoned from that day onwards, and the villagers had been too afraid to go on board. Arthur still had difficulty in believing what had happened to him the previous night, along with the story that he had just been told, and decided to go to the cabin that he'd locked himself in for safety. When he pushed open the door to the cabin, he walked inside, and behind the door on the hook was his red scarf.